The new era of commercial space travel is here. Netflix getting into video games as its growth stalls, and an all-female broadcasting crew makes history in Major League Baseball. Wednesday Need to Know, let's go. Good morning, this is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Wednesday, July 21st. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
Jill, good morning to you. How are you on this hump day?
I'm okay. Let's get to some news here. 52 years to the day after Neil Armstrong stepped off the moon, Jeff Bezos became the second billionaire in as many weeks to ride one of his own rockets to the cusp of space. Blue Origin's first human test flight went off without a hitch, Bezos calling it the, quote, best day ever. Video from inside the capsule showed the crew of four, including the oldest and youngest people to ever go to space, doing somersaults and tossing Skittles as they experienced a few moments of weightlessness. At a press conference after the successful trip, Bezos thanked, quote, every Amazon employee and every Amazon customer because you guys paid for all of this. I thought that was a little cringeworthy. I was all about this trip, and then I heard that, and I just thought it was
not exactly one small step for man, right there. I think he must have thought that was going to come off sounding better than it did. I don't really have any more takes on this. I mean, I watched it. We covered it together on Cheddar. It was cool. I mean, first of all, I had no idea how phallic that spaceship was.
Really is.
They got to redesign that thing. That's really my only takeaway. A couple points from listeners who wrote in, just to get on the record here. They are not technically, these guys, including Bezos, not technically astronauts. They are space flight participants. That's according to the FAA. Also, this was not technically a suborbital flight because there was no lateral velocity. They just went up and down. As for this issue of space insurance, Jill, that you and I were talking about yesterday, I thought this tidbit from Hannah, our resident insurance expert. We have listeners who are experts in all of this, things that I never even thought of. So it's great because they always they correct us or they add some color to what we talk about. But I thought this was really interesting from Hannah that I had no idea. So she said that the Apollo 11 astronauts, they couldn't get life insurance policies that they could afford before they went into space. So each one of them, Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Collins, and I guess that was it just them? Yeah, anyway. So they signed a bunch of postcards, and they had a friend take them to the post office so that they would be postmarked during the days that they were in space, July 16th to July 20th of 1969. That way, if they did not safely land on the moon or if something happened and they didn't return home, the postcards would become these highly coveted collector's items that they could be sold to make money for their families. Isn't that clever? I had no idea.
It's clever and just so morbid. Jeez.
Yes, that too.
In my very non-official Instagram poll, I asked if civilian tourism was so cool or a waste of money. Well, I was sort of surprised at the results. Carlo, any guesses as to how people responded?
This was on Instagram?
This was on Instagram.
Okay, I feel like people on Instagram are a little bit more like optimistic than people on Twitter. So I'm gonna say 60-40 cool to waste.
Actually, the opposite and even more extreme. 66% said waste of money and only 34% said so cool.
Wow.
I was surprised.
Yeah, that's a little kind of a bummer.
One of the more interesting tidbits, though, that I think personally that I thought came out in the post-flight interviews, Jeff Bezos told Anderson Cooper that one of his takeaways from the trip is that he thinks that basically we should be moving all heavy polluting industry to space. So he said, you can't imagine how thin the atmosphere is when you see it from space. When you live in it, it looks so big. It feels like this atmosphere is huge and we can just disregard it and treat it poorly. But he says, when you get up to space, you see how tiny it is and how fragile it is. He says, we need to take all heavy industry, all polluting industry, and move it into space and keep Earth as this beautiful gem of a planet that it is. He also said he thinks it's going to take decades, but flights like his, he said the first step, because it has to get to the point where basically a flight to space is kind of like just a flight on an airplane.
Yeah.
And then you can really begin that process of moving, I guess, all of the manufacturing stuff to the moon or wherever he thinks it's going to happen. It sounds like like Star Wars futuristic kind of stuff. But I have to say, I mean, who would have thought that you'd be taking, who would have thought civilians would be able to just go up to space for an 11-minute ride? I don't know. I just thought that was fascinating. Before you poo-poo it, there might be something to it.
Why do you think I'm going to poo-poo it?
I don't know.
Yes,
a history of 3 years of this podcast.
You're cracking me up today, Jill. Yes, well, I was going to poo-poo it. That's an absurd thing to say. I mean, look, that would be amazing, but I mean, come on, man. We're going to move all heavy industry into space. We're gonna like build factories in space? Okay, maybe one day that would be nice, but that to me is absurd.
Okay. Let's talk a little pandemic. The Delta variant now makes up. Look, Elon Musk thinks we're going to be living on Mars. All of these guys are revolutionaries, right? Like when you thought about an online bookstore 20 years ago, did you ever think that you would eventually just with one click be able to go into a grocery store and you just have to sign in and then you don't need to check out, that It'll be able to scan your phone and you could see what you bought and you'd be able to leave without going to a cash register? I mean, all of these things, what he's doing, what Elon Musk is doing with the Boring Company, with these tunnels underground, I mean, that's still not proven yet. But I mean, you've got to start with an idea. A lot of these ideas seem crazy at first and actually do turn into something.
No, look, you're right, and I don't, bet against these guys at your own risk, right? As they've proven time and time again. I just think something like the idea of like moving our industry into space. I mean, the physics alone of it just seems like it would make it I mean, we know what we got to do. We got to decarbonize. We have to decarbonize our industry on Earth. That is more doable, I think, than like building, power plants.
Polluting space.
Right, exactly.
We're going to talk a little bit about just the impact of the wildfires in a minute, but let's talk about the pandemic. The Delta variant now makes up 83% of U.S. coronavirus cases, according to the CDC. That is up from 50% 2 weeks ago. Deaths and hospitalizations now on the rise in just about every state. Although we should note once again that it's almost entirely among unvaccinated people. Meanwhile, a new study suggests the Johnson & Johnson vaccine may be significantly less effective at protecting against Delta strains than the mRNA vaccines by Pfizer and Moderna. That study has not been peer-reviewed, but the authors say its evidence is that it is evidence that the 13 million Americans who got the J&J shot may need to get a Pfizer or Moderna booster, though it is not an official recommendation at this point.
Things really start to feel like they're going south again here. I don't know if anyone else is feeling that. Did you see that Apple, to this point, bumping their return to the office from September to October? Ruh-roh. I'm going to shut up about the vaccines because I feel like I'm like shouting into the void over here. But I did like this idea that we got from Chris, one of our listeners. He wrote in that like, let's just get the health insurance companies to announce that if you refuse a vaccine, then all of the costs of your subsequent hospitalization when you eventually contract COVID will not be covered. The insurance company.
That is an interesting idea.
So he says the insurance companies would obviously be happy to cooperate because they're always looking for ways to save money. We would have to convince Congress to allow this under the ACA. That, of course, would be the hard part. Or better yet, I like this one from Brian on Twitter. Tell all the SEC states that there's going to be no SEC football until they're 70% vaccinated and watch the numbers go up. Or just back to, what we've been saying for months, like, what do we got to do? Let's pay people $500 a head, $1,000 a head, $5,000. What's the number that gets us to herd immunity? I mean, think about it, right? 50 million people, $500 a shot. That's $50 billion. I mean, Bezos could spare that.
It looks like some of the talking heads on Fox are starting to get on the vaccine train. Sean Hannity, I don't know if you saw, he came out with this kind of cryptic vaccine endorsement, but saying, he believes in the science of vaccines. It wasn't a kind of full-fledged, go get vaccinated, it's the patriotic thing to do, but it was something. Steve Ducey's been pro-vaccine. Kayleigh McEnany, she was obviously the White House press secretary under Trump. She's now a Fox contributor. She's been touting it and calling it the Trump vaccine, which has always been the biggest missed opportunity in terms of branding. It's very bizarre. Fox Business host Charles Payne saying on Tuesday that he just got his shot the day before. So I don't know. I don't know why Fox is
someone, yeah.
I don't know what is happening. Is it that the White House is taking aim at Facebook and they don't want them to go after Fox? I don't know, but I think that that's a step in the right direction.
Well,
a little late, but
yeah, yeah, a little day late and a dollar short. Sure, it's good. I mean, obviously the thing came down from up high there that they need to tone down the anti-vax stuff. Also, by the way, for the record, Fox News in New York, they require a vaccine for their employees coming back to the office. The only thing that you need to know...
Which means that every host that you see on Fox is vaccinated if they're in the studio.
Yes, exactly. The only thing you really need to know about Fox is just look at Rupert Murdoch's properties in the UK. They're all pro-vaccine, right? So the same media empire over in Britain talks about how getting a vaccine is the patriotic thing to do, while here they talk about how it's a violation of your rights or whatever.
The New York Post, though,
they've been a little bit less
no, they are extremely pro-vaccine. They had on their cover a few days ago, actually, kind of like a get the vaccine. It's the right thing to do. What are you waiting for? So, so the New York Post has been totally on board. I don't know what's
going on at Fox. Yeah.
Okay, we mentioned this a bit earlier, but the early start to wildfire season in the West is affecting cities on the East Coast, where the air quality has been at unhealthy levels. New York City recorded an air quality reading of 155 yesterday afternoon. That would be bad for Beijing. It's the worst reading in New York in 14 years. The air from Philly to Boston right now is considered dangerous for sensitive groups. People at particular risks are those with asthma or COPD, heart disease, children, pregnant women, all of whom should avoid prolonged outdoor activity. A cold front moving into the Northeast today should clear out some of the smoke and haze. I saw it yesterday. Yesterday afternoon, I was just waiting for my daughter to get home from camp, and I'm like, what is happening with the air right now? It just looked like foggy or something.
Milky soup is how I would sort of describe the feeling of walking around New York City this week. Did you catch the sunset these last couple of days? It's like blood red. Like that,
I had not.
It's
I didn't
really kind of scary, almost. Just on this same topic, the International Energy Agency yesterday warning that emissions globally on track to reach the highest output in human history in 2023. So we got that dip last year when everyone was staying home during COVID. That's not going to last, which we knew. The IAE is saying that much more needs to be done to get developing economies to start transitioning seriously away from fossil fuels.
Netflix reported earnings that missed expectations, showing that subscriber growth had slowed. The company blamed the lackluster results on a lack of compelling new programming. The studios are all working through a backlog of production delays from the pandemic, leading to the relatively bare shelves that you're seeing in theaters and on streaming services. So Netflix released all of the stuff that they had in the can during COVID. So what you're seeing get released now, for the most part, was shot and produced during the pandemic. Still, Disney Plus, Prime Video, HBO Max, Apple TV Plus, all gaining subscribers as Netflix's share of the pie continues to shrink to its lowest level ever, according to research from Parrot Analytics. And Carlo, perhaps this is why Netflix is now getting into gaming, the company confirming reports that it is going to expand into video games, starting with ad-free games for mobile devices that it'll offer on its existing service at no added cost to subscribers. But clearly, this is eventually going to be just another opportunity for them to make some money.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand this myself. Netflix's problem, as we've discussed, you and I, on a million times, is like the content's sort of bad and getting worse. It no longer really feels like a premium product the way that a Disney Plus or an HBO Max does, even putting aside the fact that the HBO Max app still doesn't work. It's sort of what happens when you try and be everything to everybody, right? What's interesting to me is Disney's, meanwhile, its focus on driving people to the streaming platform, Disney Plus, is now starting to come at a cost. I don't know if you saw this. Black Widow, the Marvel movie, starring Scarlett Johansson, box office numbers last weekend, awful. They dropped 67% from opening weekend, which really suggests that these big new releases can't sort of maintain their legs in theaters when they're available to stream. The only thing is the Fast and Furious movie also dropped 67% in its second weekend, and that movie was not available on streaming. So it could be just more complicated than that. It could be that people are spooked to go back to the theaters now that we're sort of in this new COVID wave. I'm not sure, to be honest.
Prince Harry reportedly gave Buckingham Palace a heads up that he was writing a memoir. but did not ask the Queen's permission to write the book, according to People magazine. The Duke of Sussex said to be getting something in the neighborhood of $20 million for the tell-all. It's expected to be published by Penguin Random House late next year. For the record, the publisher says proceeds from the book will be donated to charity. Unclear, though, if he's probably not donating, the advance that he's getting or anything.
I think when they say proceeds from,
what does that even mean?
That could mean $1, right? I think that's always something that raises a red flag for me. Prince Harry, I mean, this guy was born to be in this country. I mean, this grift that he's running. It's amazing. I empathize with these guys, with Harry and Meghan. After the Oprah interview, Jill, I really did, but I can't with them any longer. It's like, do you want your privacy, or do you want to get rich off of the American obsession with the royal family? Because you cannot have both.
Carlo, I kind of agree with you. And lastly, last night's Orioles-Rays game made a little baseball history. For the first time, a game was called by an all-female broadcast team. Melanie Newman, the Orioles play-by-play announcer, was in the booth alongside MLB.com's Sarah Langs as the in-booth analyst. MLB Network's Alana Rizzo reported from the field. Lauren Gardner and Heidi Watney anchored the pre- and post-game shows. Love it.
Yeah, pretty cool stuff over in the MLB. The Rays actually won that game, if you're interested. And, of course, in the NBA, Milwaukee Bucks won their first NBA title in 50 years last night, defeating the Phoenix Suns in 6 games. They were down 2-0 to Phoenix early on in this series. Giannis got the MVP, of course. He had a signature season for the Greek Freak. 50 points, 14 rebounds, 5 blocks last night. Remember, this guy was the 13th pick in 2013. He's been at Milwaukee ever since. He said repeatedly he would not leave Milwaukee until he brought that city a championship, which he has now done. An incredible season for this guy, and he is a hard guy not to like. He has signed with the Bucks through 2025, after which he can become a free agent and maybe come to the Knicks. We can hope.
We can dream. All right, Carlo, that is what you need to know for Wednesday, July 21st.
All right, guys. See you tomorrow.